Morning, everyone. I was telling you before about my obsession with watching interviews with people on cruise ships, and there were people who were blogging about their ordeal. And as I said, I couldn't imagine what an awful thing to have happen if you were, spending a lot of money going on an all-inclusive cruise, all of that fun stuff. And then this happens, right? And so one of the couples that I was following, and a lot of people were following, they were quite popular, announced on Facebook 9 hours ago, there's going to be a time of quiet. We have been proved positive and leaving for hospital soon. Blessings all. And that's David Abel. So I hope we hear from him again. I hope that it's not a death sentence. I really, man, what an awful ordeal. I hope it's not. But here is one. CBC News is reporting coronavirus claims life of hospital director in hard-hit Wuhan. And as mysterious new virus enveloped China's Wuhan earlier this year, Louis Zhiming, and I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, mobilized all the resources of his hospital in the city's Wuchang district to deal with thousands of sick people arriving daily, threatening to overwhelm the local healthcare system. That dedication appears to have cost him his life, with Wuhan's health bureau announcing Tuesday that he became infected and died despite all-out attempts to save him. So, if they're using all of the resources to save him and he still passed away, like that's not a good thing for China to not admit, but to have happen, right? And I'm glad that they're admitting it because, it underlines that the virus doesn't care who you are, doesn't care anything. It is indiscriminate, right? And I don't know what the death rate is, but it seems that the official numbers are, at the very least, underestimated. Here's 680 News reporting health minister to visit quarantine zone at CFB Trenton. Do none of our elected officials know what the word quarantine means? Anyway, here's the article. With more Canadians expected to arrive home and be quarantined over fears of the novel coronavirus, Health Minister Patty Hajdu is visiting the military base where several hundred people are waiting out the incubation period. Canadian Forces Base Trenton is housing Canadians airlifted from Wuhan, China, where the virus was first detected. Hajdu is meeting with health workers, Canadian Forces members, and staff from the Red Cross, who are all trying to keep the people in quarantine healthy and not too bored while they wait out the incubation period for the respiratory illness. I want you to notice how they're trying to manage the public perception. Oh, we don't want them to be bored. They're just sitting around doing nothing. It's nothing going to happen here. Bored, bored, bored. Nothing to do all day. Not like they have their phones and the internet or anything like that. They'll just sit around and do nothing because they're so bored. Come on, really? It's like when they position any child who's been impacted in a negative way with little or all of those things. It's to get an emotional reaction. Anyway, it's interesting to note what they're doing, but they are doing it. Back to the article. While they wait out the incubation period of the respiratory illness. So far, no cases of the virus known as COVID-19 or the coronavirus have been detected there. More Canadians from a cruise ship that was held in Yokohama, Japan, are expected to arrive in Trenton for health examinations today before being moved on to dormitories at a NAV Canada Training Centre in Cornwall, Ontario, which includes a large hotel. At last count, more than 450 people from the Diamond Princess had tested positive for COVID-19, though authorities both in Japan and here say only people who were examined and found healthy would be allowed to fly to quarantine in Canada. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't have their phones because this Mr. Abel is saying there's going to be a period of quiet, and I think they have their phones confiscated. So I wonder if Canada is also confiscating phones. If they're not confiscating phones, or if they are confiscating phones, I wonder if they'd have access to the internet. Here's Jason Kenney moving on to the blockades, of which Trudeau has said we're gonna fix this. No details on how. Just we're gonna do it. Positive thinking, sir. Okay, here's Jason Kenney though. He tweets, quote, "A tiny fringe of left-wing militants should not be allowed to block the democratically expressed will of BC First Nations or damage the livelihoods of Canadians. Either we are a country governed by the rule of law or the rule of mob." Here he is.
A very serious threat to the entire Canadian economy. This is a commodities-producing country, and we ship those commodities by rail. To have CN indicating it's going to shut down its entire Eastern Canadian network and potentially lay off thousands of blue-collar workers is devastating. It means that those commodities will back up. It means the people that produce them, their jobs are at risk now too. It means that our farmers here in the West are going to have a harder time getting their products to market. And guess what? You know, our farmers, they don't have defined benefit pensions. They don't have job security. They don't get paid unless that grain gets shipped, loaded onto the trains. Trains that are now being shut down. Why? Because some angry fringe groups are ignoring the democratically expressed wishes of every First Nation in northern British Columbia. 20 elected tribal councils not only support, but have signed benefit agreements on the Coastal GasLink project. And 8 of the 12 hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en people supported. Most of those elected councils consulted through plebiscites with their band members and saw generally 80% support for this project. And $1 billion has been set aside by Coastal GasLink in commitments to hire Indigenous workers and contract with Indigenous firms. Right now, today, there are at least 400 Wet'suwet'en and other northern BC First Nations people waiting to get to work on that project, and hundreds more who will be hired once it finally starts moving at full speed in the summer.
So I'm just going to pause him there. He goes on basically, and I let that go a bit longer than I anticipated, but he goes through systemically exactly who's approved this pipeline and how insane it is to allow a small group of agitators to shut down Canadian industry in this way. And I completely agree with him. It's a barn burner of a speech. Go watch it. Another 2 minutes and a half. It's worth it. It's worth it. Here is a question that requires an answer, and it's not just me asking, it's the National Post as well. But who are these protesters? And here's a small tweet thread talking about who they aren't. We just got word from a Canadian Resources supporter in Niagara Falls, Ontario, that 3 Coach USA buses rolled in this afternoon full of passengers attending the #shutdown Rainbow Bridge blockade. The buses are parked on Victoria Street and have Illinois license plates. So now we possibly have Americans in Canada participating in these blockades. Please share this and put a request out to local media that might be on the ground to ask where the protesters are from. And so here's images of the coach bus and the protesters. And I mean, this is a long-standing strategy. You bus in supporters from around, from where it's comfortable to drive in. But it's interesting because that requires money. And usually it's done by, Democrats. Usually it's done in the States to bolster polls here and there, right? You can look up the history of that and agree or disagree. It doesn't matter to me. There's a lot of discussion about doing this exact thing. And protests are no different. And I've seen lots of evidence of that too, busing people in for protests. And so that's not out of the norm. Here's the National Post article. Who are the protesters? There's a lot of people that aren't from these communities that aren't Aboriginal. Protesters standing in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs are only inflaming an already intense situation and have disregarded the years of consultations conducted with First Nations along the pipeline route, says Ellis Ross, who served for 14 years on one of the 20 elected band councils that signed an agreement with the Coastal GasLink. There's a lot of people that aren't from these communities, that aren't Aboriginal, that are saying hereditary leadership has full authority, and they're not doing it based on any facts. It would be like me saying the elected leadership of BC and Canada has no authority, and it's the Queen who has all authority, said Ross, now the Liberal MLA for Skeena, BC. That would be a very destabilizing remark to make. It's a very irresponsible remark to make. 5 Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have claimed that they have title to a vast 2,200 square kilometer area, about 4 times the size of Prince Edward Island, and that the elected chiefs only have authority over reserve lands. Ross questioned the validity of this point of view, given that Aboriginal title belongs to Indigenous communities and is not held by any specific individual or group. Quote, a lot of what I see out there right now from these people talking about it is basically opinion. It's not fact, he said, adding that nobody has ever proved that elected chiefs have authority only over reserves. In fact, in the Indian Act, band councils are legally authorized to sign agreements and contracts on behalf of the communities. I scroll down. And sorry, this is another one of those articles that is difficult to highlight, so I apologize. For some in the Wet'suwet'en Nation, the solidarity protests are getting out of hand. Andrew George, a member of the Wet'suwet'en Nation and wing chief of the, I'm not going to pronounce that correctly, so I'm not going to try, another band, told APTN on Tuesday that Wet'suwet'en elders are worried about the escalating demonstrations across Canada. Quote, what currently is going on does not reflect the true governance of the Wet'suwet'en on both sides, he said, adding that he's particularly concerned about young people blocking trains and chaining themselves to police cars. When you look at what's happening with the youth, it's spreading like wildfire, but there's no control. He called for a rare all-clans meeting to address the issue. Quote, we're afraid something bad might happen, George said, adding it's up to the Wet'suwet'en Nation to take charge. Yeah, interesting, right? And here's Justin Trudeau weighing in on the situation.
We had a good meeting this morning of the incident response group, discussions with ministers. I made some phone calls to Indigenous leadership as well as to a number of premiers. I understand how worrisome this is for so many Canadians and difficult for many people and families across the country. We're going to continue to focus on resolving this situation quickly and peacefully, and that's what we're going to do.
What are the blockades coming up?
We had...
So there you go. Justin Trudeau weighing in. And did you guys... So here's the council of... What is it? The best of the best for Trudeau, his small council of problem solvers or whatever he called them. And here's the Simpsons. The Simpsons predicting the future, man. Of course Trump comes down an elevator to announce his run for president. Of course he does. Sure. Why not? And of course the Prime Minister of Canada has, as many people in the room to figure out how to enforce laws against people who are basically saying the equivalent of the governance of Canada is illegitimate. It's the Queen who should be telling us what to do, and she doesn't agree with what you're doing. It's insane, right? Like, except that the Queen isn't a group of 5 elders who are behaving outside of what their community wants, right? Because they stood for election and they were not elected. So their only claim to fame is the hereditariness of their claim. So I'm the son of the old chief, and therefore I get to make this claim. That's weird, right? Like, it's really strange. It seems pretty cut and dry to me, but maybe that's just me. I understand that last year the police were widely criticized for their handling of executing the Supreme Court's instructions, but that doesn't mean that they should just ignore the instructions, right? Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, and somebody's at my door, so I have to go. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.